Everyone, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to focus on reading with a lens. So first I just want to talk about what I mean when I say a lens. A literary lens is just kind of a focus for going back and reading and picking up something new or different. So the first time I kind of go through and read, I see what's happening with the characters, I see what's happening with the plot, but using a lens, I'm going to go back and look at something specific. So if I go back and reread a chapter thinking about gender, or I go back and reread a chapter thinking about race or the historical context, I'm going to have something different that I can say about that text or something different that I pick up on and understand. That's what I mean when we're going to be reading with a lens. So we're going to focus with something called the multicultural lens. Today our goal is just going to be to identify scenes that go with that multicultural lens, see if we can go back and reread with this lens to see if we can see things a little bit differently with it. And then we'll do some deeper thinking with it once we get a handle on it. The reason that this is going to be important for this book is that the drawings that Arnold does is a great place to kind of capture that, is that there's going to be a lot of looking at different cultures. There's going to be a lot of looking at the white culture, looking at the Indian culture, and seeing how those two interact. You can see it on the picture on the bottom right. Arnold very clearly shows that division. We get some of the language, the mascots, the settings, his parents. We see it in a lot of different ways. So it's something that's going to be very present in the book. So keeping this in mind as we read is going to help us to understand the situation and take away what the author wants a little bit better. So when we move into as we're moving into the multicultural lens, I would kind of want to look for 5 different things. So it's going to have 5 different traits that we're going to look for. I'm going to throw them all at you now. We're going to try to work with them all at once, and then we'll break them down and go a little deeper with all of them. The first one is going to be power. Who has the power? In what ways do they create the power, keep the power, show the power? And then the group who's not in power, how are they kind of put down? So power is the first trait. The second one is feeling like an outsider. There's going to be usually 2 cultures or more in a text. In ours, we're going to look at 2. You want to find out what each of them value, and then what ways does that other culture or the other character, how are they made to feel like an outsider from that in culture? Stereotypes and representation, the people in the other culture, the outside culture, are going to be shown a certain way. Do they all look the same, sound the same, feel the same, or are they shown as unique people? Is there diversity within that culture? So do we get a good representation of that group, or is the author not giving us a full representation of that? Language considerations, what terms are used to describe these people? Are they hurtful terms? Are they respectful terms? If hurtful terms are in there, are they in there for a purpose? Why did the author say it that way? We want to be looking at that. So it's, as we're going through these, you'll kind of just like, we're kind of doing a system of checks and balances. Like, is this author doing a good job of really writing a multicultural book? Are they presenting us a fair, a nuanced version of this group that they're trying to describe? And last, who solves the problems? Are there characters of color or on the outside group that are saved by another culture, or do they have autonomy? Are they able to think for themselves, to solve problems for themselves? So in this book specifically, who's the one speaking for the Indians? Are they speaking for themselves? Is someone else speaking for them? Is someone else solving their problem? So these are the 5 traits we're going to work with. Right now, it'll probably feel like a lot, but as we go through, you'll start seeing that these things are coming up again and again as we're reading, and it'll be easier to spot them. So I'm going to go through and give you some examples for each one. So the first one for power, right here we're going to see a really good example of how the other group has power. This is a scene very early in the book. I'll read it first and then I'll talk about it. My teeth got so crowded that I could barely close my mouth. I went to Indian Health Service to get some teeth pulled so I could eat normally, not like some slobbering vulture. But the Indian Health Service funded major dental work only once a year, so I had to have all 10 extra teeth pulled in one day. And what's more, our white dentist believed that Indians only felt half as much pain as white people did, so he only gave us half the Novocaine. So that scene right there, I'm already getting this power dynamic, right? He has a white dentist. So one, I can think about it in that way. White people have the positions of power, like working as a dentist, working as a doctor. Indians don't have other Indians who are treating them. And then also, how do those people look upon the group that they're serving? So he sees them kind of as half people. He's not giving them the proper medical care. So we can kind of say a lot about this. How are they being oppressed? How is that power created and kept and shown? Who has the power? Like, all these answers kind of come up here, and we're going to see that that exists in a lot of different ways. So power is one thing we're going to look at. The next one is feeling like an outsider. And some of these will overlap. Like, I could almost say like Arnold could feel like an outsider in that last one. For this one, I'm going to read through it, and then we'll look at in what ways is Arnold made to feel like an outsider. But we reservation Indians don't get to realize our dreams. We don't get those chances or choices. We're just poor. That's all we are. It sucks to be poor, and it sucks to feel like you somehow deserve to be poor. You start believing that you're poor because you're stupid and ugly, and then you start believing that you're stupid and ugly because you're Indian. And because you're Indian, you start believing you're destined to be poor. It's an ugly circle, and there's nothing you can do about it. So here, like, he's not talking just about being poor because, they're poor. They're poor because they're Indians, he's saying. So we see that repeated 3 times in here. There's another one in here somewhere. So he's kind of putting that, like, people who are white are able to have success. People who are Indians are not able to have success. So they're on the outside there because they're not able to break into that success culture. We can see the white dentist is able to have success, but the Indians are not. They're in this cycle of being poor. So we see them on the outside of what that kind of successful culture would be there. Stereotypes and representation. This is one when we see Indian characters, when we see white characters, if we see characters of any other race in the book, we want to ask, are they all presented as being the same person? Do they have the same traits? Or do we see them in different ways? So this is an example of, I think they show you some of the characters in different ways in the book. We see Arnold's mom and dad. We do get the depiction of both of them as like being in that failure cycle of not being able to achieve the dreams they want. But Arnold does show that, like, even though they failed a little bit, they are unique people. They have dreams. We see his mom who wants to be a community college teacher, his dad who wants to be a saxophone player. So we're getting a little bit of diversity in the characters who are in this culture. So we're doing a good job there of seeing that. The next one, language considerations. We haven't gotten too much into language yet in this book. We're going to see some examples of it. So I just wanted to make sure that I touched on it one more time, but I'm not necessarily going to go through an example with you yet. We'll see it come up later. And the last one is who solves the problems. This is going to be a big one. I think we'll see a little bit of both. We'll have to go back to that evaluating and judging and seeing like who's doing it overall in the book. But I'll read out this scene with Arnold and Mr. P. Okay, then, he said. He leaned closer to me because he didn't even want the trees to hear what he was going to say. You have to leave this reservation. I'm going to Spokane with my dad later. No, I mean you have to leave the res forever. What do you mean? You were right to throw that book at me. I deserve to get smashed in the face for what I've done to Indians. Every white person on this res should get smashed in the face. But let me tell you this. All the Indians should get smashed in the face too. I was shocked. Mr. P was furious. So we see Arnold is having this problem, right? Arnold's struggling to like see that he's in this failure culture, that there's really no way out. He's not sure what to do. Instead of Arnold having the autonomy to figure that out on his own, Mr. P, our white teacher, comes in and kind of saves him in this situation. He gives him the advice. So we're losing a little bit of that autonomy there. So we're seeing some things that are giving a good depiction, are giving some good diversity in the book. We're seeing some things that are limiting our characters. We're going to do a lot more with this. I just want to work on identifying today. So I wanted to throw a couple examples at you. And the idea with the multicultural lens, like, is to look at literature and see how is it commenting on something. In this case, we're going to be looking at race. So literature can reinforce oppression of other cultures without the author realizing it, without the reader realizing it. By going through and using this multicultural lens, we can see what texts are doing that. And it's not just going to exist in literature. It's going to exist in the textbooks you read in other classes. It's going to exist in the news outlets you see. It's going to exist in the TV shows that you watch, the movies you consume. Like when you're watching those things, look at who the people on screen are. Are there different races? Are the people of different races being kind of put into a box? Are they being stereotyped? Are they the people who solve their own problems? Being aware of this can help us to be inclusive with the language we use, with the way that we consume text, with the way that we criticize text, with the text that we choose to read, to watch, to talk about. So it's to help us kind of see a little better what's going on around us in terms of the multicultural lens. So I'm going to transition to talking about what this will look like, the work that you'll do with it. So to keep track of this stuff, you'll mostly be doing annotations with it. Most of you will have an actual hard copy of the book, so you'll have a couple different ways into doing this. One is you can write directly on the page. The next is that you can use Post-it notes. Even if you have only the online copy, you can keep Post-it notes in a notebook and post them in there. And the last one is typing it into a Word document, uploading it to Schoology when we have to submit things. I would say that's your last option. Like, only type it if you can't do this other stuff. having it in a way that you can move it around, that you can flip back to the page, that you can actually do it with handwriting, that's going to be a lot more beneficial. So I would say if you're going to do this option, like send me a message and let me know why. Because if you have a book or if you have Post-it notes or if you have a notebook, that's the way I would encourage you to do it. So if I'm looking with all these different ways, I'm going to give you another example for some of them, but then also show you like what the annotations look like. So if I'm doing it in my book, this is kind of how I would do it. So I have this conversation where Arnold's saying, come on, I said, who has the most hope? White people, my parents said at the same time. So we're getting a little bit more into that, like who has the power? His parents are saying who has the power. I put my annotation right on there. And my comment is white people have the power. His parents pass this knowledge down to their children. So that's a lot of like there's generational oppression that's going on there. But the nice thing about this is that I don't have to write the quote. The quote's already there. I've just boxed out where my quote is and I've put my writing in there. For some of you, that may be a little tough. Writing in a book can be tough. Writing small can be tough. But I think that that's the best way to do it because then you can just go back and see it. If you want to use a Post-it note, you can do that one of two ways. If you have a notebook, you can be putting it in your notebook. Or I also put my Post-it notes right on the page. I would still write the page number on there, even though I didn't on this one. But then I just leave it on that page so I can flip back to where my Post-it note was. So this one is the who solves the problems. I said Mr. P is giving Arnold the solution to his lack of hope. He's acting as a savior and taking away some of the autonomy or power of Arnold's decision. And again, the nice thing is I can put that right where I want the quote. Like I'm commenting on this section right here, so it's right next to it, so I can see that. The last way is in your book. With this one, you have to do a little bit, or your notebook, the last way, or if you type this into a document. With this one, you have to do a little more work because you have to actually type in the quote and the page number since you won't have it there. So when I first started teaching here, that's what we did to the rowdy ones. We beat them. That's how we were taught to teach you. And then I have my thoughts. Which one am I focusing on? I'm focusing on the power aspect. The white group is establishing its power by coming in and teaching Indians how to act properly. And I'd probably give a little more thought on how like the teaching is in parentheses. So that's the last option. Those are the three ways that you can try it out. So we're going to use that to start our practice with identifying the multicultural lens. Aside from the multiple choice questions in today's assignment, what you're going to be asked to do is to annotate or comment on 2 different examples of reading with a multicultural lens. For just this first one, I will ask you to type it into the assignment. In the future, I'll ask you to upload it in some way. I'll give further directions for those that don't remember how to upload things from our notebook like we were doing in the first and a little bit in the second marking period. So I will still encourage you, make those comments in your book, whether it's through the Post-it note or the writing, but also I'll ask you to type it into today's assignment just so I can see it in that first try. So again, our goal today is going to be identify scenes that demonstrate aspects of the multicultural lens. I would encourage you to either write down the aspects of the multicultural lens down, have this slideshow open when you're working, because we'll do a bunch of practice with it. Eventually, you'll commit it to memory, but at the beginning, it's helpful to have that next to you as you work.